Hey everyone, it's deflating atheism here. Here, let me get my microphone. Deflating atheism here after a 2-week unproductive absence, and I'm here with JMDapologetics101, the YouTube channel, who's kind of a new Christian apologetics channel. And so, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Well, I'm a young Christian apologist. I'm 19. I started this channel because my generation is obviously going towards the secular side and atheistic type side. And, 75% when they go to college or check off non-religious. And then Generation Z, this is Sean McDowell's statistic. I believe it to be true, but only 1% believe science and faith are compatible, which obviously is equivocation of both definitions, I think. So I basically started this. Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh no, continue to say what you're going to say.
Oh, okay. So when I first started studying apologetics, I was like a young Earth fundamentalist. I was a big Kirk Cameron, Ray Comfort fan, and so on. But then I came across apologists like William Lane Craig, John Lennox, and so on. And they definitely convinced me of Christianity being completely true, I think. Not absolutely, but most probably true.
Yes.
Then I watched, I almost got deconvinced of my Christian faith because of people like Jacqueline Glenn, Dusty Smith, TJ Kurt. And then, I watched
this. What time was this?
Probably my sophomore year of high school.
Okay.
Not too long ago.
So like 2012, no, 2014 or something?
Yeah, something like that. I came across their videos. I didn't even know how to counter half the stuff they say. Now you realize most of the stuff they say is just crap.
Of course.
Yep.
Dusty Smith is probably the most obnoxious YouTube atheist, and that's saying a whole lot, but yes.
Yeah, in that atheism worldview video, I got a comment. I said in the video I'll probably get a bunch of dislikes because that's what atheists do. They don't actually try and counter a point that you make, and he said, yeah, you're going to get a lot of dislikes because you're rude and insulting. And then I mentioned, Call of Dusty. He swears like in all his videos. That's why I barely watch any of his stuff. And he ad hominems.
Yeah. Well, I swear a bit in my videos too, but yes, the atheist Thumbbot squad, truth be told, is not quite what it's been in years past. If you've noticed, they used to have a whole basically posse of people. I think Max calls it the Atheist Clown Car Brigade, that would just descend en masse into every Christian anti-atheist video and just click that dislike button and leave all these drive-by comments. I think their cold passion for it has unraveled, or maybe they've just grown up or something. But yeah, it's a lot more amenable now, I believe, to Christian or anti-atheist views than it may have been around 2012 or something like that, which is when I think internet atheism really peaked, was around 2012.
Yeah. I go back once in a while and test my apologetics, and they still say a lot of bullshit, I would have to say.
Yes.
Yeah. But people like Cosmic Skeptic, I listen to. I watch his debate with Frank Turk. I know Frank; he's pretty awesome. But
yeah, you have a picture with him on your Facebook page.
Yeah, I have like 8 pictures on my author page on my website with J. Warner Wallace and other apologists.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, Cosmic Skeptic. Truth be told, there is kind of a younger crop, or at least I should say a newer crop of YouTube atheists, but I don't really see it being what it was in years past, which kind of segues into what I wanted to talk about first, which is, and I take issue with something you said when you were introducing yourself, but yeah, where do you think the whole Christianity versus atheism debate in the wider culture, where do you think we are right now, and where do you think it's going in the future?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's atheism. That's a big thing. It's this postmodernism.
Okay.
Skepticism and agnosticism we're heading towards. And scientism for sure. Everything has to be scientifically proven. And
yes. Well, as I'm sure you're aware, the kind of the kind of postmodernist left is often at loggerheads with the kind of scientistic atheism, and always has been, which is why the kind of a Richard Dawkins brand of atheism came as such a shock, because it was so Victorian in sensibility. It was as if every like intellectual development of the past 100 years never happened. So it was it was almost pre-modern rather than postmodern.
Yeah.
But
like I was just gonna say the atheists of the Enlightenment were a lot more intelligent than the new atheists, I would say.
yes, well, that's not saying a whole lot, but yeah, and it also goes into something else I want to talk about, your worldview video. But being 19 years old, in my opinion, and I've seen studies that bear this out, I think you are right there on the precipice of the kind of a Generation Y and Generation Z. And I think that there is a generational about face happening with Generation Z, where I think they are considerably more churched. Of course, there's a political about face that's kind of less interesting to me, but I think there's a repudiation of much of the narrative that has come to them that I think Gen Xers and millennials have kind of taken for granted. Now, you cited a statistic that sounds very sketchy to me. It sounds very suspect.
Yeah.
I think you're asking a very prejudiced question to get that kind of result.
Yeah, it's from Sean McDowell. I can send you the statistic where he got from stuff later on, if you on Facebook or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, whenever I see a statistic like that, I think, okay, something's fishy here, you know.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. That's why it's not on my website. I just have the 75%. Through my conversations, I've come across that where they think faith and science are incompatible and so on. But I think my generation just have ignorance of what faith is and so on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is, I think if anyone comes at it with the kind of preconception that religion is opposed to science, it's obviously because somebody put something in their head.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It's not a conclusion a person naturally arrives at that faith is incompatible with science. I mean, it's almost just a very natural, intuitive conclusion to look at the natural world and think that there was an intelligent designer who put these elegant laws that the universe abides by into place. It takes a bit of kind of crowbarring to start to have for people to see science or the scientific method in opposition to this complete straw man of an invisible man in the sky or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not natural. But yes, I mean, I believe that in 4 years, when the freshmen of today are graduating from or entering college, rather, it's going to be a complete 180, truly.
Yeah.
Because I think they found that Generation Z actually attend church more than Generation Y and the Gen Xers did when they were the same age. So you can't just say, oh well, they'll get out of it once they grow up. They're already correcting for age and saying that yes, this Generation Z does go to church more.
Well, my point would be is they definitely lack apologetics if that statistic is true, and if they do go to college and come across atheist propaganda, they probably won't know how to answer half the stuff that's thrown at them, which would be my point.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm going to fight you on that one. I'm sorry.
Really?
I want to be but I mean, like guys like Frank Turek and J. Warner Wallace and those guys, they did not have their ministries set up really so much, even just like 6 years ago. And so I think it's much more likely that a kid who's like 15 or 16 has been exposed to a guy like who I think the world of Frank Turek. Obviously, I don't think he's the be all and end all of Christian apologetics, but I like him. I think that for a teenager who sees one of his hour-long presentations, I think that's enough to inoculate them against like 95% of atheist stupidity.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm just sort of saying that I think it's from my, at least my experience of conversations with my generation, Like I was at a youth group last night, and I'm speaking there next week. I asked them, "Does anyone know apologetics?" There's only 2 people raise their hand out of like 50, for example.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my point. It may just be in PA, but in California, it's and you know libtard land. It's probably like that.
Yes, yes. I actually have a guy who lives in Southern California, and he's just so miserable with the kind of endemic libtardism there that I think he reaches out to me. But yeah, but yes, I mean there are guys like Frank Turek doing their presentations. So I mean I think it's terrific that there are guys out there saying yes, a rational defense of Christianity can be mounted, and in fact, the rational defense of Christianity is in fact superior to whatever defense of atheism may be marshaled.
I would definitely argue that the new atheist arguments are nothing new. Like they're just rehash of prior atheist arguments, just with new spice, I guess you could say. Like Christopher Hitchens, just spice with his accent, he convinces many people.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Well, Christopher Hitchens is a rhetorician basically, and I actually have some admiration for him because he does, quite unlike the other new atheists, he does bring to bear a breadth of cultural knowledge that the other new atheists don't. And so, I mean, I enjoyed reading his articles in Vanity Fair, for instance, where he would just like talk about Princess Di or whatever, and he would. All the time, he would tear down these icons, no matter whether it was Jackie Onassis or Princess Di or Mother Teresa or God himself. So he is essentially an iconoclast. So it's not surprising that he would go against God himself. But his kind of tirades against God are actually his least interesting writings to me.
Well, is he like, he seems more conservative from because he's like pro-life and stuff.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, that's. I will respect him for that.
He's a big supporter of the Iraq War too.
Yeah, yeah.
Which kind of puts him at odds with many of people who have kind of taken up his cause.
Yeah, now his arguments against God's existence and so on, I don't think are that good. Like, did you see his debate with Turk?
No, I didn't.
There's 2 of them. The first one, Turk probably lost, but the second one, I think he definitely won because Frank Turk has, clips on his YouTube channel of, certain subjects, and Christopher Hitchens just begs the question, just avoids it. And then he goes on some rant about, theism is evil and whatnot. And the question will be, did the universe begin to exist or something like that?
A question which Christopher Hitchens is eminently unqualified to offer an opinion on, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he died. Christopher Hitchens died in like 2009, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was kind of like when Frank Turek was taking off and Christopher Hitchens
yeah.
Downslope, yeah. So yeah, in my opinion, I think the whole new atheism thing is winding down, and now I think the whole like SJW versus kind of the alt-light part of atheism, the skeptic community, that's rended them apart, basically. So I think this is a terrific time for Christians to come up and say, okay, you've heard all the invisible sky fairy nonsense. Now here are the actual Christian arguments,
See, my problem is that all these, atheists online YouTube channels, they have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and then YouTube channels like Reasonable Faith or William Lane Craig's website only have like 30,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
That just shows you the lack of apologetics, I think.
It's also an indication that for religious people don't need to go online for their community. A lot of Christians can go to church, they can discuss these things.
Okay.
In their when atheists go on the internet, that is their community.
that is their church.
Yeah, exactly. So there will always, in any case, there's always going to be a little more energy on the atheist side as far as online stuff goes. because most Christians, I'm not going to say most Christians, but a lot of Christians don't need to defend their faith because no one's calling them into account.
Well,
they're about their lives without much contradiction.
I think Christians would still need apologetics because we still have doubts because we're not absolutely sure, obviously. So I think you should be able to answer certain questions. Like, obviously, you don't need to present a Kalam cosmological argument and stuff like that, but I think all Christians should have a decent response to the problem of evil because obviously we all go through it at one point.
Which is the atheist argument, such as it is, that I would put the most stock in.
This is why I like... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Christians can become kind of glib on that subject and say, oh, well, there's no logical reason to believe that that a benevolent God must defeat evil, which is true, although it kind of trivializes the article, an argument that has a lot of persuasive force. And so I think they kind of trivialize the argument at their peril.
Cosmic Skeptic admitted in his debate with Frank Turk that evil wouldn't disprove the existence of God, but he didn't admit that would prove God's existence either. I would still argue that it does.
Yeah.
As C.S. Lewis would say.
Yes. What was I going to say before? But yes. But yeah. I think, geez, I completely lost my train of thought.
You did say you had a problem with something in my one worldview video.
Oh, yes. Well, no, the problem was that I think the worldview you were talking about was scientific naturalism, which a lot of people think is basically synonymous with atheism these days, although that's not the case. For instance, I think like Nietzsche had a much more interesting worldview than the scientific naturalist, although he would be opposed to many of what the new atheists certainly would say.
Oh, no, I would say it's, atheism, of course, like I say in the video, tries to make a worldview without God, and you can make multiple worldviews without God. So it's sort of like different sects of atheism, and then Christian, other religions have their sects, which is why I argue in the video, essentially.
Yes. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just about the least interesting thing to be an atheist at this point. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I after studying apologetics, I don't plan on becoming an atheist anytime soon.
No, I remembered what I was going to say, and so this is my experience: is that for a long time I was not a Christian, I was not an atheist either. I was a generic theist. Until new atheism came along, and it kind of shined this light on atheism. It put like a spotlight on atheism. And I think when you see something, kind of cast into that kind of relief, there are two ways to go. I mean, you could just, okay, well, sure, atheism is the thing now. I can go along with it. For me personally, it was cast in such an unflattering, harsh light. I could only see its flaws. And so I always thought, well, back when I was a generic theist, I always thought, well, the atheist must have something up their sleeve. There must be some like powerhouse argument for atheism. I'm just
great God.
Yeah. And so when like atheism just completely dominated this kind of online culture, at least, I could see as clear as day there's nothing there. So it's actually new atheism that actually kind of made me back away almost from a kind of weak generic theism into Christianity.
If you read any articles on logical fallacies, you probably won't become a new atheist anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like I do articles on those are the most articles I have on my website. And for example, the God of the Gaps argument accuses the theist of an argument from ignorance, but when you think about it, you're appealing to something in the future that you're ignorant about, and you're trying to make your argument from that. So that, I think, would be an argument from ignorance.
Yeah. And I mean, they commit it themselves. They say there is no evidence for God. You say, well, why should I believe there's no evidence? And then they immediately turn it back on you. Well, you convinced me. I'm not convinced that there's any evidence for God. I was like, well, okay, your ignorance of evidence for God does not prove anything. They're the ones making arguments. That's the irony of it all, is that everything they accuse Christians of doing, they do themselves.
Yeah. I think there's good evidence, obviously, for the existence of God. It's like in William Lane Craig's debate with Lewis Wolpert. You know, his main claim would be there's no evidence for the existence of God. Then William Lane Craig would be, here it is. There is evidence for the existence of God. They would go back and forth. And then in the Q&A section, or the rebuttal section, Craig just destroyed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They always their minds move in very tight circles. They always go back to their starting assumption that there is no evidence for God. You'll notice it like when you're discussing any sort of apologetic argument. It's like they'll say there is no evidence for God. You say, okay, well, how about this? You could give the Kalam or something. And I say, well, is this argument sufficient to believe in a God for whom there is no evidence? It's like, what? That's the evidence. Why did you just circle back to your starting conclusion? It is the worst kind of circular thinking.
Well, but, they assume scientific naturalism, and it's like Hume's argument, you know, in our experience, we don't see miracles. You've only lived, you know, how many years on this planet. By your own logic, in the past 10,000 years, however long humans are, there could have been a miracle that's someone experienced before. That's an Inspiring Philosophies video on miracles and so on.
Yes, and I mean, in the Bible, miracles are described as happening at very significant times. They don't just happen gratuitously. I mean, it's not just, you know, the Bible covers 1,000 years of history. So yes, even that, a miracle is a special occurrence. Well, that does not mean, however, that miracles ever stopped happening. And again, you could look into like Craig Keener's book or his 2-volume set. I don't believe miracles ever stopped happening.
I still don't either. But, you know, when they say that, you know, give me evidence for God, I'll ask them, what would you consider evidence? Miracles. Miracles is like beyond absolute proof. And even if you were to give them a miracle, they would either try to refute it or say, oh, it's impossible for that to happen because, you know, I've never seen it happen before or whatnot.
Well, actually, a lot of times what they'll do is that they'll say, oh, well, well, no, obviously, what would happen in practice if a miracle were to occur is that they would dismiss it as a hallucination.
Yeah, just
delusion. Yeah,
just like that one debate, William Lane Craig and Keith Parsons. If you saw that clip where you know, he was talking about hallucinations, and then Dr. Craig asked, you know, the same type of question. Then he said, if, you know, God appeared right in front of me, I'll join you in the peers of the church, you know, next Sunday. Then he said, you don't think we've been having a hallucination?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's essentially unfalsifiable according to their worldview.
Yeah.
And so that's I think the whole of New Atheism is so completely insubstantial that I don't think it's enough to give counter arguments, because I don't think arguments is what got people into atheism to begin with.
Well, you know, actual atheist philosophers like Thomas Nagel, Michael Ruse, and so on, they actually give arguments against the existence of God.
Yes. But again, how many atheists do you meet got into atheism because of Thomas Nagel?
Like almost none.
Exactly.
I mean, I have one guy comment on my YouTube, you know, channel, and like if you saw in the comment section of the Kalam cosmological argument, there's like 30 comments. I'll give him one sentence and he'll respond with like 3 essays and try and say, well, I'm wrong and so on, even though I found contradictions in his 500,000 letter comments. Well, you know.
Yeah, is that the guy like JMP 2012 or something?
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen that guy. He's a bit of an annoyance. Yes.
I just stopped because you have to stop at some point, because otherwise we'll lead to an infinite regress of just, or actually in this case, a potential infinite, because you never actually reach infinity and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean that's what astounds me is people will leave like novels in response to my videos. I'll usually like read like the first 2 sentences and maybe the last sentence, and I mean I might reply to that, but yeah, it's not even worthwhile to.
Oh no, I actually read his comments, because he actually gives the responses, not, you know, who created God or godly gaps. He actually gives philosophical arguments against the Kalam and so on.
Yes.
So I tried my best to answer his objections.
Well,
He talks,
you're new to the game. I'll give you.
Yeah.
I bet you won't be reading those novel length comments any longer.
Yeah. If I get more subscribers, then yeah, I probably won't pay attention to those anymore. But yeah.
What were you going to say about like when you respond to him?
Well, his objection was mainly to since time began at the universe, you can't really apply causality to the universe. I just showed how something can't come from nothing, and then he argued from Hume's standpoint that we don't see, immaterial causes causing, things and so on. And then he said he's not a materialist, and he believes in immaterial things like abstract objects. And then I asked him, so you're not a materialist, but yet you don't think materialism could have had an immaterial cause since it did begin to exist?
Yeah.
And he avoids the question and so on. And his fancy philosophical mumbo jumbo, I would say.
Oh yeah, well he's kind of assuming his conclusion there, it seems.
Yeah.
But yes. But so like I said, I mean, I've gotten so exhausted and so disgusted with many of them. I'm starting to see it as kind of a bigger project. Because like when I first got on YouTube, I'm going to take on all these atheist YouTube channels, and I actually get here and I was like, no, I don't want to be dealing with these guys, quite honestly.
I tried to respond to all comments. I actually, read his stuff because it's actually more intelligent than my typical comments like, you're retarded for being a Christian, you believe in Sky Fairy or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't disprove invisible pink unicorns and so on. I don't really pay attention to those ones.
No, that gets an instant ban for me. But that JMP 2012 guy, I don't even know what his. I might be now mixing him up with your name actually, but you know who MPC 2012, whatever his name is. But yeah, he's like a fan of what's his face of TMM, who makes horrible logical fallacies in own videos. So it's hypocritical of him to attack me when he's a fanboy of TMM who makes the worst arguments. He says if God created the world, God must be one of the 4 fundamental forces of physics.
Yeah. Now that would be I'm sort of accusing you of fallacy of an ad hominem, trying to discredit his argument because he's a fan of TMM. I'm sorry, I have to say
of hypocrisy. I'm not saying that makes it.
Yeah, okay, never mind then.
Okay.
But yeah, see, TMM, he's an idealist, so he thinks all reality is just inside our mind, so nothing, there's not an outside reality. That's what idealism is. So he says everything that's conscious is subjective, but yet he makes so many objective truth claims about Christianity and so on. So I would either be a realist or just stay subjective, basically.
Yeah. His position is stronger than that, I think, and I mean stronger in what I like, actually narrower. And might be making some mistake, but he seems to almost be saying that he's explicitly said there is no mind independent truth, in which case you've given up all sorts of rationality as a whole, it seems.
Whenever he asks for a citation, so many claims he makes, you can just ask him for a citation. He never gives citations from the videos I've seen, at least. And then whenever he doesn't understand the word transcend, he says, "What the F does that mean?" or whatnot. And he just
I don't understand what the hell that means. Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody takes. Well, okay, you don't understand. That doesn't prove anything.
So an argument from ignorance, because I don't understand, I'm just gonna make fun of it and say it's not untrue and so on. But
he is the master of the wild goose chase method of debate. And I don't know if do you have any video responses to him?
See, I see your video responses, and I don't know what YouTube's policies are. Like, are you just able to record their videos and then respond to it like he does and so on?
Yeah, it falls under fair use. That doesn't mean that they won't try to take you down. I haven't had any issues with that myself.
Okay, because I saw your Hunter Avalone response.
Yeah,
and that he's a classic example of lack of apologetics. I watched his religion chat on his second YouTube channel when the 2 atheists who were debating one Christian, first off, the one Christian didn't even know what apologetics is. And then the two atheists used the horror, like he assumed where did God come from, and God came out of nothing, like Hunter did in his video. And that's where Hunter got that idea of where did God came out of nothing, because that atheist said that in his video. Clancy something was the atheist name.
Don't know.
So, yeah, it doesn't matter because his
what argument, was that before or after Hunter?
That was before his, religion video.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think he just got the bad end of the stick when, getting a Christian to respond and so on.
What's ironic in about so many atheists is that they'll make it seem as if they're thinking for themselves, and they're challenging these preconceptions, and they just arrived at these doubts by themselves just by thinking critically. No, what you'll find time and time again is that someone's whispering in their ear. Those conclusions that they claim that they arrived at by themselves just by independent critical thinking is because they're actually uncritically listening to someone else.
Sounds about right.
So yes, but a lot of times you won't. Very conveniently, atheists will not give an argument. In fact, they'll kind of put forward their atheism as a non-position.
Well,
what you made your last video about.
Yeah, what I notice is that they make so many arguments and try to make a case for why atheism is just a lack of belief. You've gone through that effort. Why don't you just make an effort to go against the existence of God at this point? It seems like to me.
Yeah. And if an atheist says atheism is just a lack of belief,
is there? Oh, go ahead. I want to hear your response because I have my own.
There's a very easy way to trip them up. Just respond, I agree 100%. You do lack a belief in God. There's no argument. It's like saying my elbow hurts. It's like, why should I doubt you? It's possible you're lying, but I have no reason to doubt you. The problem with lack of belief atheism is that it doesn't give you a basis for discussion.
It doesn't give you a basis for philosophy. That's why in philosophy, I use that definition in my video from an actual encyclopedia of philosophy. That's a proposition that God or gods do not exist.
Yes.
So when you're talking about metaphysics and so on, you're studying reality. So psychological states are aside, unless you're an idealist, of course, like DMM. So that's just my response.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if an atheist is unconvinced or hasn't made up their mind, what's wrong with the words unconvinced or I haven't made up my mind?
Well, I think I could just say, I'm unconvinced of your unconvincedness. So therefore, your refutations of my arguments, I'm just unconvinced, and therefore your refutations aren't true and whatnot. It's begging the question, it seems.
Yeah, just a recursive agnosticism. But
yeah.
They'll only put forward that position when it's convenient to do so.
Yeah, and then
they're consistent in at all.
Then they make existential claims, and they try to make a worldview without God. That's my whole point in that video.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. Is like I said. I mean, if their atheism is simply a lack of belief, there is no basis for discussion. Now, if they want to say me as a Christian am in any way errant in my beliefs, then they have to be making a claim at some point of the way. Now, there are two ways, really, to say I'm errant in my thinking. Either my thinking is wrong in fact, where when I believe in God, my belief is wrong because there is no God. So, okay. The other way is to say that my belief is not well-founded, that I believe on bad evidence or non-existent evidence. They're both. I'm just going to say that when atheists implicitly recognize there is no God, has a burden of proof. What they do not seem to put together is that they claim there's insufficient evidence for God or there's no evidence for God, is similarly a universal existential negative claim that bears the same exact burden of proof.
Well, this notion that you can't disprove anything, I just find silly. Like, you can disprove that there are no Tyrannosaurus Rex on the earth. You can find their bones and so on. None exist.
Yeah.
And you can disprove a married bachelor because it's logically contradictory. It can't exist. Of course, they're trying, did you see Rationality Rules video on, God does not exist, and he tries to show logical contradictions in the attributes of God?
I actually believe I did. It was actually kind of a far-ranging video that I meant to do a response to. Yeah.
Yeah, like I believe he plays the clip from William Lane Craig saying, if you can show something to be logically contradictory, it follows most likely that it does not exist. So he tries to do that with omnipotence and, could God lift a rock, too heavy that he can't lift?
Well, but what is significant about that video, I know exactly the video you're talking about, but because that's the video I want to do a response to. The video is actually titled, "Yes, you can prove a negative."
Yeah, which I respect that view. I just don't think he did it well with God.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yes, I believe you can. But then what gets, I'm sorry, I don't want to talk over you. But what suddenly, if you read through the comments, you have other YouTube atheists like modified skeptic saying, "I've seen the lights. Yes, you can prove a negative." And so it's like us Christians have been telling you that for the last 10 years. It's only when another atheist tells you that you suddenly believe it. But yeah, what I like is that at the end of the video, he says that still doesn't mean that the claim that that God doesn't exist has a burden of proof. It's like, well, okay, why?
You
why
just claim that you can prove it, but now you say you don't need to prove it.
Yeah, they don't need to prove it, even though they can in principle. So
unless you want to just remain irrational and just believe something without evidence, which would be God does not exist, since you admitted that you can disprove a negative, I think it follows that you're being irrational, I would essentially say.
Well, there's also the point that the claim you can prove a negative is itself a negative, and so would by its own standard.
Oh, yeah.
So there's that too. But I like how he made one concession and then immediately pulled back,
Yeah. Because, his new atheist buddies, Richard Dawkins and so on, completely disagrees.
Yes.
So he's appealing to authority there, but, well, unqualified authority, my bad, because you can quote, I think, scientific stats for,
Yeah. I think a lot of their kind of groupthink doesn't even come from the powerhouse new atheists like Richard Dawkins. I think a lot of it is a kind of I call it a body of folk wisdom that they've kind of accumulated over the last 10 years, and it's kind of all from this very kind of insular YouTube atheist community, and most of it is excuses for why they don't have to prove anything, which are themselves just kind of these bold assertions that they don't want to actually try to defend. Yes.
I think the most simplest question you can ask them is, do you believe in a flat earth? And then they'll probably say, yeah, you can disprove a flat earth. Well, flat earth would be a negative since you could disprove it. So you just sort of defeat your statement.
Yeah. Well, they could weasel around that. So they could.
I'm sure they will find something. There are other examples too.
But yeah, another one I like is when they say oh, there are 3,000 gods. Why should I?
Yeah. That's such a loaded statement. They have so many presuppositions they have to prove, and that you have to equally show. You yourself have to go through the thousands of gods and show how they're all equally irrational since you're making the claim and so on.
Yeah, you kind of drop there. Yeah,
and then they equivocate God almost 3,000 times.
Yes.
I saw it in one of your videos. God could be a stick. So yeah, I would agree it would be irrational to worship a stick and so on. But the stick exists though, so I guess God will exist. But Yeah,
I'm trying to think of his name. That was not me. That was the guy. That was the atheist.
Missing the mark or something.
Missing the mark is a Christian. No.
No, I think that would be engineer atheist or something like that.
No, that was Logic.
Oh, yeah.
I love how they all give themselves these self-aggrandizing names. It's always essence of thought, logic, cosmic skeptic.
You just got destroyed by the power of logic, Call of Dusty.
Yeah. Yes. And they plaster the words reason and logic and rational
and
then everything they're associated with. And if you're a very stupid person, that might be very convincing. But
I wouldn't say stupid. I would just say ignorant. You lack apologetics, or you don't understand what these concepts, and you're new into it. But stupid to me is where you know something to be true, but for some reason you believe otherwise. That would technically be a delusion. But I I would call some new atheists like Dusty Smith. I would definitely call them stupid or
Yes.
just dishonest.
Yes. Yeah. There's one of the kind of more prominent guys is Kyle Kalinske. See, that's why I think if you accomplish anything in life, technically you might have you might have an over 100 IQ. But when I see like Kyle Kalinske, I'm just like, this guy's a dimwit. This guy's like batting with 95 or something. There's no way he's above average intelligence. You know who Kyle Kalinske is?
I have not come across. I may have watched one of his videos, but I've not come across him yet.
Okay, well, he's Secular Talk, so he's part of the
yeah
network.
He's an idiot.
He is an idiot. He is an idiot.
His response to I think it was like Justin Bieber disproved the Big Bang Theory, even though most Christians believe in the Big Bang Theory. And then he tried to use the complex argument, the designer is too complex. The same man, Richard Dawkins, who makes that argument, that's an argument essentially against the fine tuning. He asserts this infinite amount of universes that would seem more complex than an unembodied mind like God. Like he seems to contradict himself.
Yeah. Missing the mark, and I have actually talked about that. We will grant that, unlike what most of atheists give, it's actually an argument. Richard Dawkins' argument is an argument. It's not a good argument, but at least.
Are you talking about his central argument on like page 168 or something like that?
Yeah, why God almost certainly does not exist.
Yeah, it's when you just look at it, it's invalid. So
yeah,
it just does not follow from the premises because it's just all over the place.
Yeah.
And then you got people like Lawrence Krauss, who doesn't even understand validity and soundness, the difference between the two.
What is? Oh my God! It's like whenever atheists try to attack William Lane Craig, they try to undermine the validity of syllogistic logic, and so I don't know if you remember this. Like Lawrence Krauss says, all
men are like homosexual, something like that. William Lane Craig is a man, therefore William Lane Craig is homosexual.
Therefore, he's. It's like these guys. They try to parody syllogisms and they still fuck it up. And Thunderfoot did the same thing when he tried to do like relativity. It's like you guys can't. That's like a syllogism is the simplest form of logic, and you still fucks it up.
I had logic in my last semester of college, and when I took that class, I was just like, these guys are idiots.
Yes. And it goes to show you, I think like Lawrence Krauss and Sean Carroll to a lesser degree, they are obviously cosmologists of some accomplishment.
Yeah.
But they are more public atheists than they are cosmologists.
Yeah.
I don't know if Lawrence Krauss was not a pop culture figure, he would probably be like a third tier cosmologist.
Yeah. My problem with Sean Carroll is, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but is he trying to make a model to try and disprove the second law of thermodynamics? I heard something about that where he's trying to set up that type of model. It was on the Theology, Philosophy, and Science YouTube channel. I saw a video on that.
I mean, again, with all due qualifications, I'm not an expert, but he seems to think that the second law might only be locally true. It's not a part of it's not universally true.
Okay.
It's only in like certain frames of entropy or something that the second law of thermodynamics is true. But again, I'm not an expert.
Most cosmologists disagree with him, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. And I mean, you kind of need to do that to want to overturn that first premise of the Kalam. If you're going to even float the possibility of a past infinite universe, you have to kind of work your way around the second law of thermodynamics.
Well, for the scientific evidence, I still think the philosophical arguments are pretty good, and they don't know how as cosmologists, they don't know how counter that. And most philosophers accept those principles, at least with the infinite regress, how you can't have an infinite regress of past events. And the universe obviously is a sequence, so it can't be an infinite sequence and so on. That's an argument I would give against the oscillating universe. That if you remember that in my video.
Yes, and again, I'm not an expert, but William Lane Craig talks about even on a scientific basis, an oscillating universe can't extend infinitely in the past.
Yeah, it's like the law of gravity; it'll just crunch back on itself and never expand again. I mean, I'm not acting like I'm a cosmologist. I'm obviously not. I'm only 19, but I put a lot of hours into this stuff, so I understand basic concepts. Like,
yeah, well,
that's why are you from?
Fairness to you, I mean, the atheists you go up against don't know anymore, so certainly,
Well, the ones I've come across don't seem to know anything when it comes to certain arguments. Like when I hear questions, who created God and so on.
Yeah,
I'm just not. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when they say things like that, it is spoken, especially when people who aren't even on like YouTube, people you just encounter in real life, say, if God created the world, who created God? We just don't know. I'm content with saying I don't know. It doesn't seem to occur to them that other people might have answered this question. It is a very contented ignorance.
Well, it's basically basic philosophy. You don't need an explanation for the explanation and so on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And everything that begins to exist has a cause. So unless you can prove how the greatest conceivable being had a beginning, which by definition he doesn't, anything greater than God would be God by definition. So he's an uncaused thing.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Which is we are not making a special pleading argument to quash the inevitable atheist objection. But that goes to another thing I want to talk about is when atheists encounter something like that, they won't even make a counter argument. They'll just throw out the name of a fallacy. It's like you give an argument and say special pleading. You can't just say it. You have to explain how it applies to my argument.
Well,
they think it's like a schoolyard game where you just like throw out a name and it's the duty of the other person to counter it,
Do you know who Greg Koukl is?
Yes, I've heard the name, yes.
Have you heard of Tactics? It's a book he wrote. It's basically how to counter. If you don't know too much, you can at least ask these questions and have a good conversation.
Yeah.
The Columbo tactic, if you heard that one, is what do you mean by that? What do you mean by special pleading? How would you come to that conclusion? And would you consider this? And typically, if they don't know what they're talking about, those three questions will point that out if they can't answer them.
Yes, but I mean, I've done so many. Unless it's like a guy with his own YouTube channel or something, I found 95% of the cases they never commit to the argument.
Yeah.
They'll either abandon it or jump to some other argument that they won't commit to. I've had guys like a dozen times jump from argument to argument to argument, never committing to any one of them because they're determined not to believe.
On one of my videos, this guy was, he actually believes in the bubble universe theory. So basically the multiverse. And he believed our universe was eternal. And I tried pointing out the philosophical arguments because he knew a lot more about the science.
Yeah.
And of course, he used an ad hominem. Oh, you're using third BC century people. They're ignorant. They believed in flat Earth and stuff, even though Aristotle didn't. But he went on from that to, you're only a Christian because you're afraid of death. Like, so random.
Yes. Which is a bulverism, yes, which is a fallacy in and of itself.
Yeah.
That is what I've noticed of course. I always say the atheists talk a lot about science, but there's no science they love more than the pseudoscience of bullshit psychology and bullshit sociology. Because you're only a Christian because you're afraid of death. You're only a Christian because that's what your parents raised you as, which are psychological and sociological claims, neither of which are grounded in any sort of evidence.
Well, I could just make the same claim. Oh, you're only an atheist just because you don't want to have to, go to higher power or whatnot. Account for what you do.
Exactly.
Well, of course, it's a bullcrap claim I would make because I don't know the person. Unless you physically tell me I'm an atheist, like Thomas Nagel has admitted, he doesn't want there to be God and so on.
Yeah.
But of course, he's more consistent in his philosophical view, I would argue.
Well, like I said, I personally do not think atheists arrive at their conclusion due to arguments and logic. Uh, that's my own experience. I could be wrong. Uh, that doesn't mean I will try to discredit somebody else's argument by saying, "Oh, you're only an atheist because of this reason."
Some I believe do think they have, but I just don't think they understand the basic rules of logic and philosophy and so on.
Yeah.
Like most don't even know what logic is. Like call it
Yes. Yes. That is. Oh, I'm just an atheist because I believe in law. It's like, okay,
yeah.
tell me. I've gotten so many guys. None of them know what logic is. They seem to think that I'm getting worked up. I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, no, I get worked up too.
Getting worked up. But yes, they seem to think that logic is synonymous with their own laziest assumptions. That like it's very easy to think that Jesus did not come back from the dead. It's almost kind of the natural human tendency not to believe that. So to them, it's logical just because it's the laziest thing to believe.
Well, logic is just a body of knowledge for assessing whether an argument is good or not. Essentially, that's the basic definition I would give.
It's a system of rules of inference for deducing necessarily true conclusions from a given set of tests. Try getting that out of them. Anyone who says, "I'm just so," and that's another thing with like the Hunter Avallone. It's like he just says, logical in my thinking.
I actually do like Hunter Avallone. I just think he is misled, and I think he's probably had bad experiences with certain Christians. And the chat I watched, the Christian had no good answer at all for any of the questions. So he made overall Christians look bad because he didn't know how to give a defense and hope within him.
And it's also true that Hunter Avallone came from a kind of maybe closed upbringing where he had this young Earth creationism, and he was brought up. And unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people is that they throw the throw the baby out with the bathwater. Basically, I mean, if they give up one part of their belief system, they have to get rid of all of it. And I think you see it with like some of the people from Westboro Baptist Church. It's like, hey, well, if I'm no longer in this church, I have to just throw up Christianity entirely.
Yeah, I love whenever they're brought up for when trying to talk about Islam. What about the Westboro Baptist Church?
Yes.
34 people somehow is a relevant equivalency to 1.6 billion people, or just the terrorists themselves.
Yeah, it's such a lazy thing. It's such a lazy thing that they reach to just to tar all of Christianity.
Well, when I said 1.6 billion, I didn't mean that all Muslims are obviously terrorists. Now Islam, from my reading of Surah 9, I get the impression that they want to kill the polytheists, which they believe Christians are because of the Trinity and so on.
Well, I always say if you want a guy to say Islam is cancer, I'm not your guy. Plus, I think that policy has served me well. I hate to sound like craven here, but the policy has served me well now that like Facebook and Twitter are really cracking down on anti-Islamic speech. So yeah, it's not a discussion I get into, but yeah.
If you got rid of all the passages, about killing the infidels and so on, the Quran wouldn't be a bad book. It would just be a repeat of the Bible, just rehashed and plagiarized, basically.
Yeah, but they will always they will always go to bat for Islam for some reason. It's like if there's a terrorist attack or something, it's not because of Islam, but then by the same token, it's because of religion as a whole. Somehow it's like it's the fault of religion, but it's not the fault of Islam. It doesn't make sense. It's like how if there's a suicide bombing, is it because of the Quakers? I mean, is it because of the Methodists? I don't know. The Zen Buddhist, maybe.
That reminds. What is your question of do you think Hinduism is peaceful and so on?
I cannot provide a knowledgeable answer to that question.
Now, I do not know if the religion says this, but this was in my missions and cultures class. And basically, we watched a video where they strangle, like, most of the population in India is male. Oh.
Yeah. Here you
go. Well, I'll wait.
No, talk.
Can you hear me? Oh, so basically most of the population, they believe that a male will give you more blessings. So if they get a female, they will strangle it out of the womb and so on if it comes out a female. And they do this with lots of females. And it's basically worse than abortion, I find it to be. Now, I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's a direct influence from Hinduism, but it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, it seems like it might be some like holdover from tribalist thinking.
Yeah.
Because like not necessarily to defend. I'm not saying that Islam has to be great, but a lot of what people criticize in Islam is actually a pre-Muslim tribalist kind of mentality.
Yeah, and people will try and compare that to the Old Testament and so on with the violence in there. Even though a lot of it is more justified. Like, the Canaanites, they complain about that, but then when God does something about evil, because they sacrifice their own babies, they burnt them and so on to their pagan gods and so on, then they complain about, God wiping out evil. Now there's debate whether, did God actually command them to kill the children and so on, even though there's some verses that allowed the Canaanites to leave the promised land, even though the slaughter was coming. They were allowed to leave, but many of them stayed, so sort of a warning, but
yes, but for many atheists, they'll take a 2,500-year-old text and just read the English translation and think there's no cultural knowledge to bring to bear on a 2,500-year-old text. Oh, well, that sounds bad to me. I mean, geez, it's like, okay.
Yeah, talk about this is my main problem with people like Cosmic Skeptic and so on. I'm all for debate whether God exists or whether this religion is true, does it claim the earth is flat and whatnot. My problem is when they go into the text and act like they know what they're reading and distort what it says and so on, and just make straw man arguments basically of the Old Testament and New Testament. It's poor exegetical skills.
I actually like I do not believe that the Bible ever says the earth is flat. But for people who are putting forward the argument, they actually give contradictory reasons. It goes into what you were saying, what you said in one of your videos about the Kalam. Two of the verses, well, there are a lot of expressions that occur throughout the Old Testament repeatedly, but one of them is the circle of the earth.
Yeah.
And so that could mean sphere. We both know that could mean sphere. But
the Hebrew word means sphere.
Yeah. Well, it means round, basically. Used to describe it.
And then they're trying to say it's a flat disk, even though by definition a flat Earth will be a cube and whatnot, from the typical view of flat Earth.
That goes into the other thing, is that the other point of evidence that they bring up to suggest that the Bible says that the Earth is flat is it talks about the four corners of the Earth. So it's like, okay, so your two pieces of evidence are in contradiction with each other.
I'm literally in a class of Revelations right now, and we're learning about symbolism and stuff, and the four corners. Some people say are directions and whatnot.
The four cardinal directions. Yeah. Yes. But what I like is when atheists try to disprove something, and their reasons are contradictory to each other.
Well, another thing they pull from the book of Psalms, and one of the Psalms that says the earth is set upon the pillars and whatnot. I would argue, well, of course, Psalms are poetry, and they give hyperboles and stuff like that, personification. I believe those could be talking about the fine-tuning art, the fine-tuning of the universe, and there's a sustainer and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like you read the book of Job, and it's poetry, and in my opinion, very beautiful poetry. But you can't like go through and say, okay, poetry. This is supposed to be like a science textbook here. poetry. It's like it says, God feeds the birds. God provides covering for. It's like, well, what is God holding out his hand with bird seed or something? It's like, okay.
Well, when they say there's a sky daddy in the air, they assume God is bodied, and they don't. That just shows you that they don't even. I would just ask the question to find God and give two examples. And when they give their false examples, just say that's not the Judeo-Christian God.
Yeah. I don't believe in that God either. So
yeah,
bully for you. The other thing going into the Kalam, I think we're already running over, but I just I want to mention about the Kalam when the reasons they give are in contradiction to each other is when atheists say the first premise of the Kalam, and I said the first premise before, that was actually the second premise, but the first premise of the Kalam is invalid because nothing ever comes into being, and then the first premise is invalid because virtual particles come into being from nothing. We can both tackle those individually, but the more important point is that they're in contradiction with each other.
I never actually thought about that before when they bring up, material causes.
It's all made of pre-existing stuff. Oh, but these virtual particles come into being from nothing. Pre-existing. Okay.
Well, if that's your view that nothing comes into being, even though I think a new thing like a human, fetus and whatnot is a new thing itself because it has its own genetic code and so on. But you have to adopt materialistic nihilism where you don't exist and so on, and that gets into Descartes and so on. Does the physical actually exist? Then you have to deny your own mind and so on. But even then, something new is being made with different qualities. Yes, there's pre-existing material, but something is beginning to exist, something new.
Yeah. And then there are properties of the universe which just continue, like entropy. It's not made of pre-existing stuff, but it's increasing.
Yeah. With the expansion. Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about your channel. I think it would be a good time to wrap it up.
I have 4 series going on right now. I have, my main apologetics series, and I have book reviews, logical fallacies. Atheists should watch those ones; they need them. And then I have studying the case book, which it's called the Bible. I use that in reference to J. Warner Wallace's example of how in his detective cases he has to study the case book, what the case is, and so on. Right now, I only have 1 video on that, but I'm planning to go through the entire Bible, sort of like the Bible Project and so on.
Excellent.
And I have a website called Christian Truth Through Apologetics. That's sort of my main thing, where I have articles and so on that I've written too.
Okay, excellent. So, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah. What's your view on predestination?
Dude, we set the ground rules, okay? I'm not going to talk about that kind of stuff.
I just say, can God predestine free will? Because obviously, as Christopher Hitchens would say, we don't choose to be free. So that's sort of my view on that.
Yeah, well, obviously, our freedom is everywhere mediated by external circumstances.
Yeah.
So I don't see any particular contradiction there.
Yeah, I'm a Molinist. I'm neither Arminianist or Calvinist. That's some more theology William Lane Craig goes into, but I won't bore you with that.
Yes. I actually have not gotten into those kind of intra-Christian debates too much myself. So as the atheists say, I'm not afraid to say, as atheists like to say about themselves, I'm not afraid to say I don't know, which is something we would like to see more of from them. But yes.
Cool.
But yes, JMDapologetics101. He has a great YouTube channel, and please check it out. And anything you want to say?
Yeah, 1 Peter 3:15, give a hope and defense I have within you, with gentleness and respect. I always forget that last part, but
Yes, it's I violate it in principle pretty much every day, quite honestly. But yes, I need to work on being a little more gentle on how I address atheists. But I want to thank you, and everyone go check out his channel, and have a good night, and God bless.
Yep, same.